Now, I realized so that there is this zone in the bottom left that doesn't work all that well. Yes?
And why is there a negative slope on all the way around?
Because, just because it's a good question because basically you're highlighting my PowerPoint skills is what you're figured out there. But there's a graph in the book that was created by a graphic artist, not by me doing it on a PowerPoint slide that actually looks the right way. So there is this spot in the middle where things either where things are so-so fidelity, so-so convenience, they don't really work all that well. And in the book I was looking for a name for it, and we call it the fidelity belly. It looks like sort of like a guy's growing belly in the spot there. And one other aspect of all of this to sort of set this in motion, as I started to realize and to talk to people in technology and innovative kinds of industries, is that there is a technology effect that goes on here, that the borders of convenience and the borders of fidelity are constantly being pushed outward by technology, so that if you make like the highest fidelity, if you make the iPhone and you make the highest fidelity cell phone there is today, technology is always going to be able to allow somebody to make a higher fidelity phone tomorrow. So you're going to have to invest in that and make it continue to be the high fidelity phone, or you're going to drop down. And the same with convenience. It constantly pushes out the borders in both directions. So it sets this sort of chart in motion. It's constantly growing outward, and in fact the belly is constantly growing outward too, along with those things, so that if you have a product or service that doesn't change, eventually you're going to wind up being overtaken by that fidelity belly region. And newspapers, I would say, like for my heritage as writing for newspapers, newspapers are an example of a product that was fixed, and at one point in time was the most convenient way to get news. I mean, a package of news landed on your doorstep every morning. There was no more convenient way to get it for decades and decades, but the newspaper didn't change. And as technology drove convenience outward and made it possible to get news in ever more convenient ways, and the newspaper stayed stuck where it was, the borders of the fidelity belly just overtook it, and the newspaper landed in this spot where nobody cares about it anymore. So the next step was, I ended up having this conversation with Reed Hastings, the Netflix CEO, and I started doing some other interviews and trying to figure out what this model was about. And at the time, I worked for USA Today, and I wrote a couple of different columns for USA Today about this, sort of sketching out this idea of what this was like. And I really thought at the time that it was really all about music and movies and media and technology, and not about anything else in life. And then I got an email that actually changed my mind about that, and it was an email from a guy named Daniel Stevens, and Daniel worked this is the town of Washington, North Carolina, beautiful downtown Washington, North Carolina. Daniel Stevens ran an employment agency for disabled people in Washington, North Carolina. And he wrote me this email. It was actually a couple of months after the columns ran. And again, I had thought that this theory and these ideas were all about technology and innovation and business. And he wrote me this email and he said, well, we saw your ideas in this column about fidelity and convenience, and we started talking about it in our office. And we realized that there are a couple of kinds of employees that a company in town would want, a little business. As representing people with handicaps, we could not ever supply people with the high fidelity employee, the perfect ideal employee, especially if you're talking about a restaurant or a store or something like that. We had no ability to be the high fidelity employment agency. So we were stuck in this fidelity belly area for all these years, and we were having trouble placing people. So he said, what we decided to do is to go and try to be the high convenience employment agency for the town and let everybody know that, like, if your dishwasher quit in the middle of dinner hour, that we could have, maybe not the perfect employee, but we could have somebody who could do the job to your door in 20 minutes and have them ready to start. So we made it known that we were the highest convenience employment agency in town. He said it made a huge difference. We actually started having many more placements. And this was my aha moment for the book. This is when I thought that, oh my God, this is actually about something bigger than just this little narrow field of technology. And I started exploring how it would apply to all kinds of things. And as you get into the book, I apply this to everything from, like employment agencies and technology to, whole countries and how they're evolving and where they're heading. So, what I started to do then at that point was I went around to different companies and talked to them about it and kind of got feedback and bounced the model around off of people. And one of the places I went was Kodak. And as we talked about it, I mean, it's fairly obvious in retrospect, but Kodak is looking at a world where really high-end digital cameras are doing really well. And of course, the ubiquitous, high-convenience cell phone camera is what is also doing really well in terms of picture taking. And the stuff, deep in the fidelity belly these days is film. It's just not even a viable product for Kodak any longer. And he started applying this to all kinds of different industries. I met with Jeff Bezos of Amazon.com, and we talked a lot about the Kindle. And now again, keep in mind that when we're talking about, we're talking about these, where this applies, we're talking about applying to the mass market, not just early adopters, but how do you get out to the mass market? And there's a perception that the Kindle is this huge success, and it's really been driving lots of conversation about e-readers and all of that. But actually, Amazon has only sold about 1 million Kindles so far. When Microsoft says it sold 1 million Zunes, we all laugh and say it's a big flop. So the Kindle is really something that's mostly been picked up by early adopters so far. And in part, it's because for most people, for the big market that Amazon's trying to address, which is people who love to read books, for people who really love to read books, the paper book is still the high-fidelity experience. Those kinds of people love the feel and the smell and the touch and everything else there is about having a book. So the Kindle can't beat the book on fidelity. The only way Amazon can actually beat the book or have a viable product for the mass market is to be the super convenient version of a book. And it's going that way because, this idea that you've got this thing you can carry around hundreds of books in, one device, and you can buy any of 500,000 books online at any instant, and the books are a little less expensive. But the problem is that the Kindle itself costs $350, $400. So the Kindle itself, buying this device, is not convenient for most people. I mean, we were willing to spend some money to buy an iPod, but you always had to spend some money to buy something to listen to your music, right? Your music never played itself. A book plays itself. You don't have to buy something to read a book. And so that's a tough proposition, a tough thing to get over. So right now, I would say that the Kindle is in that fidelity ability, trying to get out, trying to go to the convenience end. We mentioned Motorola, and I don't know if any of you even remember, but in the, 5, 6 years ago, Motorola first came out with the Razr. This was long before smartphones. At that time, most cell phones were clunky, kind of chunky types of products. And Motorola first came out with the Razr. It was unlike anything anybody'd seen in cell phones before. And they first came out with it, they could charge $600 for this thing. And it was hot, it was sleek, it was the coolest thing. It was basically the iPhone of its time. And it was the high-fidelity cell phone, and people loved it. And these things started to, become a part of the culture, and people started to buy them like crazy. And but Motorola made a huge, huge mistake with the Razr, because it started up at that high-fidelity, super-fidelity end. And what Motorola did was, A, it did not invest in the technology to keep it up there. It didn't realize it had a high-fidelity brand, and that's what it had to do, is continue to make it a high-fidelity brand. So it didn't invest in the technology, and actually worse, it drove the prices down and drove ubiquity, built 200 million of these things, threw them out into the marketplace so that the Razr became the cell phone that your grandmother got when she signed up for a 2-year plan.